This is a Power 98.7 podcast. Now we're talking. Subscribe to Power 98.7 podcasts in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. There's more on power987.co.za.
All right, let's revisit this controversial and vexed issue of vaccine mandates. We spoke yesterday about this case where the CCMA ruled that the dismissal of an employee for refusing to get vaccinated against COVID-19 in defiance of the employer's introduction of a vaccine mandate policy requiring all employees to be vaccinated was deemed to be substantially fair. The arbitrator rejected the employee's request to be either reinstated or fully compensated, but the ruling has drawn widespread criticism, with some legal experts insisting it is wrong and that it must be reviewed at the Labour Court or the Apex Court, meaning the Constitutional Court. Let's speak to attorney and founder and managing director of Setlago, attorneys Khwaedi Setlago. I see here they've got your full names, Khwaedi Monare Setlago. Is that how you roll?
Yes.
You go by all two names there.
Yes, good morning, TT. That's how I go. In fact, I prefer it that way. But whichever one is simpler for one to pronounce, they can hold on to that.
Nah, they're all easy to pronounce. So for me, thank you very much for coming on. Just give us your take in terms of why this decision is wrong.
Well, for starters, TT, one has to address the factor that we are in uncharted waters as a country, especially as a labor market.
Yeah.
The reality of the matter is that the pandemic it has had a daunting impact on both sides of the employment, on both the employer and the employee, because we have seen companies and corporations shutting down during the pandemic. So obviously that means hundreds and thousands of people are losing their jobs. So now, in an attempt to obviously respond to dealing with the pandemic, the government had to then get a vaccine. However, and this is so because, as I said, the pandemic has had a daunting effect on all of us. So the arrival of the vaccine would obviously also have to enter the employment space, because, as I already said, thousands of people are losing their jobs, and then you have acts such as the Occupational Health Safety Act, which mandates the employers to provide for a working environment that is safe and healthy. So obviously this then poses a serious or a difficult situation for the employer, especially because we are dealing with a virus that is unprecedented scientifically. But similarly, we are experiencing circumstances which are quite foreign to the employee parties as well. So while the Act is clear on the obligations of the employer and the government to provide for a safe and healthy working environment, the Act and the government regulations, they are quite in terms of how are employers expected to roll out the vaccine, or how are they expected to administer the use of the vaccine in the workspace. So there's currently no clear indicator or regulations or law in terms of how the vaccine must be administered. And as we would remember, the president of the country, when the vaccine had arrived, he clearly stated that it is not mandatory. So that is,
which is still the case.
No one would be forced to take the vaccine. So it will be at liberty of one to choose whether or not to take the vaccine or not.
Is that not still the case?
It is still the case.
Yeah.
The vaccine remains not mandatory, so people still have a choice whether or not to get vaccinated.
Even in a company that puts in a vaccine mandate, you still have an option. What you don't have an option with, though, would be the consequences of that choice.
Well, I mean, we that brings us to a key question, TT, because South Africa is arguably one of the best countries to live in the whole world, and by virtue of having the Bill of Rights, like the one we have, because the Bill of Rights in sections, there are sections which are relevant to this discussion. You have Section 10, which is the right to human dignity. You have Section 12.2, which is the right to freedom and security of person, which includes the right to bodily integrity. So the key question is, can the employer force or mandate employees to get vaccinated? That's where we start. Before we discuss what happens when you don't comply with the mandatory vaccination policy.
Maybe explain what it means, what the right to bodily integrity actually means, just very briefly.
Well, it means someone has a choice in terms of what enters their body or what leaves their body. So, for instance, there are people based on their respective religious beliefs. They say, well, I don't subscribe to Western medicine. So, in refusing to take Western medicine, they can quote the right to bodily integrity to say, but my belief doesn't allow me to be injected with Western medicine. So that would be an example of what it means.
Okay, so when that collides, sorry to interject and to because I'm just trying to make sure we in the interest of time that we get ready to the crux of the matter. When that right to bodily integrity collides with the obligations placed upon an employer to provide a safe and healthy working environment, what happens there now? Because that's seemingly where we are.
Well, it means that there needs to be a balance between the interest of the employer and the interest of the employee, because labor is the primary social economic force, while capital is an indispensable role in nation building. So the only way to resolve disputes that arises between employees and employers with regards to their interest, there needs to be a balance. So there must be attempts which seek to create and maintain an understanding and cooperation between the employer and the employee, because one cannot be favored while another is being oppressed. So, and let me just make quick reference to a labor appeal court judgment in the TDF Network Africa versus the referees. So in this case, it involved an employee who could not provide services on a particular day based on their religious beliefs. So now, the labor court in that judgment said that an employment practice that forces or penalizes an employee for practicing her religion is a palpable invasion on her dignity. So the employee is then forced to make an inevitable choice between the conscience as well as their livelihood. So what the labor court said is that the employer must take reasonable steps to reasonably accommodate employees. So even in our case, the employer would then have to show that they did actually take reasonable steps to accommodate the employee.
So what should have happened in this case, as we wrap up, Mr. Sitlao? What, in your view, should have happened? How should this matter have been settled or resolved?
Well, if one goes to the arbitration award, the commissioner references incapacity. So now, because the Labor Relations Act in Section 188 provides for three reasons for which one can be dismissed. One is misconduct, incapacity, and operational requirements. But for our case discussion, it's incapacity. So incapacity refers to one of two things: poor performance or ill health or injury. So now, the decision in this case, the employee was dismissed on the basis of permanent incapacity. And that was brought out because they had refused and actually indicated that they don't have any intention of taking the vaccine. Okay. So now, when the commissioner was adjudicating over the case, when I read the arbitration award, he correctly, in paragraph 19, describes what incapacity is. And then Again,
sorry, Mr. Stawa, I know you are going to try and go through the full details there but I'm just wanting to sum up because we are already out of time.
Yes.
What needs to happen next? Because you're saying this needs to be needs to be challenged and reviewed in the labor code. What is the process that would need to unfold?
Yes, TT. So the employee does have that right to review, because in my view, the decision by the CCMA Commissioner is incorrect because the employer didn't prove the existence of incapacity. So it means that the decision that was reached, it doesn't have a basis. So the employee can take the decision of the CCMA to review at the labor court for the decision to be overturned.
All right. Khwaidi Monare Setlago is an attorney and founding managing director of Setlago Attorneys. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr.
All right, so I think this one really needs to be, I think we need a decision once and for all on these mandates. I mean, can you imagine if every employee who objects to taking the vaccine has to now go through this process? Where does people get the legal resources to be taking matters to review and all sorts of things? It is a huge problem, and I think the sooner we can get the highest court in the land ruling on this one, the better.
You've been listening to a Power 98.7 podcast. For more podcasts, visit power987.co.za or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.